In the green hills of southeastern Africa, where red clay roads wind through valleys like ancient scars, there lived a widow named Nwanneka. She was known not for wealth, not for beauty, not even for her famous husband who had once led warriors into battle, but for her silence, her eyes, and her relentless pursuit of learning. After her husband died in the War of the Four Rivers, she became invisible to many. But fate had a plan, and that plan would not only resurrect her dignity, it would crown a queen. Nwanneka had once been the wife of Chief Obi-Dyke, a warrior of repute. His white head wrap was known in 5 regions. His spear never missed. His words silenced rooms. When he died defending the hill people, his family mourned him with drum beats, and his name was chanted into the soil. But Nwanneka refused to remarry. "My soul," she said, "belongs to the memory of my husband and to the future of our daughters." The elders whispered. Women distanced themselves. Some said she had gone mad. Others said she was cursed. Yet in her little hut by the stream, she was reading, writing, teaching herself by candlelight. Years passed. A king died. The village of Umudike was without a monarch. For the first time in generations, the Council of 9 declared they would select a queen, not a king. They gathered under the tree of verdicts, wearing their ceremonial white robes and tightly wrapped white cloths around their heads, a symbol of purity and ancestral wisdom. The people expected them to choose a girl of noble birth, someone from the royal bloodline. Instead, Elder Osuji, the most respected among them, raised his staff and said, "Call the widow who walks with her head high, the one who refused to be buried with her husband's shadow. She will prepare our future queen." There was silence, then shock, then murmurs of disbelief. Nwanneka was summoned. She arrived without fanfare, barefoot, her gray hair wrapped in a scarf. She bowed, not in fear, but in honor. "Teach our daughters," Elder Osuji said. "Prepare them. Among them is the next queen." "But I am just a widow," she replied. "No," he said. "You are the fire the mountain forgot." Nwanneka began her mission. She opened a school without walls in a forest clearing. She gathered every girl whose mother allowed it. They sat on mats made of woven grass. She taught them history, law, courage, diplomacy, and the power of the spoken word. The girls who once fetched firewood now debated matters of state. One day, a girl named Adaku asked, "Who taught you all this, Mama Nwanneka?" She smiled and said, "Grief did, books did, and silence." The men of the village began to fear the rising power of these educated girls. Rumors swirled. A council elder tried to shut the school down. But on the morning of the harvest moon, over 200 mothers marched to the village square, wearing white wrappers and singing freedom songs. "I would rather my daughter be wise than wealthy," they sang. "I would rather she sit at the table than serve it." Elder Osuji met them, wearing his ceremonial white head wrap, and said, "Let the training continue." 4 years passed. 20 girls had graduated Nwanneka's teachings. Now, the elders declared, "Among these women is our queen." 3 names were chosen. 1 girl had royal blood, 1 had riches, and the 3rd was Adaku, the orphan with the quiet voice and iron will. In the royal courtyard, each girl gave a speech. Adaku's voice rose like thunder from a whisper. "I do not seek a crown for myself. I seek it for the girls still gathering firewood when they should be holding books." The crowd was silent. Elder Osuji stood. He removed his white head wrap and placed it on her head. "Today," he said, "we crown a servant, not a ruler." Queen Adaku ruled with wisdom, but beside her throne was another chair. It was not as tall, it was not as decorated, but it was always occupied by Nwanneka. "No decision is final," the queen would say, "until Mama Nwanneka speaks." Together, they established the House of Women's Wisdom, where girls could learn freely. The queen banned forced marriage and made reading compulsory. And when asked where her strength came from, the queen always said, "From a widow who chose not to die with her husband." When Nwanneka died, she was not buried in the widow's grounds. She was laid to rest beside queens and kings, with a white cloth wrapped around her head, the same one Elder Osuji had once worn. On her grave it was written, "She never wore a crown, but she placed it on the head of a nation." And every year on the Day of Legacy, girls across the land wear white cloths on their heads, recite her proverbs, and plant a tree in her honor. 10 years after Queen Adaku's coronation, she honored Nwanneka's legacy by building a school in the desert region of Omaruyi, where children still learned under trees. It was called the School of Sand and Stars. Adaku chose a woman named Olamide, one of Nwanneka's earliest students, to lead it. But when Olamide arrived, the chiefs of Omaruyi objected. "A woman will not lead our sons." She didn't argue. She built classrooms from mud and old fishing nets, taught the children herself, and let the results speak. By the second year, even the sons of chiefs sat in the front row. Change does not come without resistance. A rebellion of traditionalist men, called the Sons of the Staff, began to challenge the reforms. They believed a woman's place was behind the wall, not on the throne or in the classroom. They marched through towns wearing red and black, tearing down libraries, shouting chants, demanding Queen Adaku step down. In secret, Queen Adaku met with her council. One of her generals, a quiet aging man named Babatunde, known for always wearing a crisp white head wrap, stood and said, "My queen, we do not silence fire with fire. We silence it with light." He proposed a radical idea: let the people choose through debate. And so, the Great Dialogue was born, a tradition that would shake the land. In a large circular arena built from red earth and palm wood, people gathered from every region. One side wore white, led by women and youth. The other wore black and red, led by the Sons of the Staff. For 2 weeks, arguments, wisdom, and poetry filled the air. The Sons of the Staff were fierce. But on the final day, a 14-year-old girl named Zimuzo, who could barely speak 3 years ago, stepped forward and asked one question: "If women are too weak to lead, why are we strong enough to raise the ones who do?" The crowd erupted. That night, the rebellion ended, not in blood, but in applause. Years later, Queen Adaku built a new council, not of warriors, not of chiefs, but of fathers who raised daughters. This garden of fathers met under acacia trees. They wore white cloths on their heads, not as a sign of royalty, but of humility. Each member had to answer one question: how did you raise her? Men came from across the land to speak with honesty. Some wept, some sang. One even offered to clean the library in exchange for a single book to bring home. Education had changed the women. Now it began to change the men. A dusty little book written by Nwanneka was found inside a sealed clay pot during a drought. It was a journal titled Words I Could Not Say. Inside were thoughts on grief, power, motherhood, silence, and forgiveness. Queen Adaku had it published. The book flew across regions like a migrating bird. In prisons, girls passed it hand to hand. In cities, it replaced textbooks in certain schools. In rural markets, mothers wept over its pages. She never shouted, one woman said, but we heard her. The book became a sacred symbol of quiet power. Many years later, Adaku grew old. She had no biological children, but she had 1,000 daughters. One of them, Ifunanya, was chosen to speak at the anniversary of Nwanneka's passing. She walked to the top of Mount Ncheta, dressed in a white cloth, and released a single dove. She spoke to the sky. You taught us to listen, then to speak. Now we teach others. The Queen Maker lives in all of us. And the winds blew gently. When Queen Adaku passed away at age 71, the nation mourned for 7 days. Drums were silent, markets closed, women tied white wrappers, men fasted in her honor. The council offered the crown to her most brilliant student, Ifunanya, the girl who once spoke to the sky. But she refused. I do not want to wear the crown, she said. I want to build the road where future queens will walk. Instead of ruling, she founded the Royal Academy of Women's Leadership, where girls were trained to become ambassadors, judges, healers, engineers, and philosophers. One day, a young man named Ezekime, the son of a famous general, asked to enroll at the academy. The elders laughed. It is not for boys, they said. But Ifunanya replied, did Nwanneka teach only girls, or did she teach the world? Ezekime became the academy's first male student. He learned humility, peace negotiation, and how to listen before speaking. Later, he would be sent to mediate between warring clans. He became known as the boy who carried water instead of a sword. A secret society of old nobles called the Black Palm began to spread lies about the academy. They said women were cursed, that books were foreign poison. They even plotted to burn the academy's library. But on the night of the attack, the mothers came, not with weapons, but with drums, fire bowls, and chants. They stood in front of the school until dawn. Ezekime stood with them, wearing a white head wrap in honor of Nwanneka. The rebels saw the people were no longer afraid and left in silence. The king of the neighboring kingdom, Abo, had long criticized the reforms of Umudiki, but one day, without warning, he arrived, on foot, not horseback. He was wearing a white wrapper and a white cloth wrapped around his head, a gesture of surrender and respect. He said, I came to mock, but I stayed to learn. Teach my daughters as you taught yours. That day marked the first interkingdom alliance led not by armies, but by educators. A woman named Ngozi, one of Nwanneka's grand students, traveled beyond the shores of Africa. She spoke at universities, taught in refugee camps, and published a book titled The Widow's Fire: African Leadership Through the Eyes of the Silenced. The book spread across continents. Schools in Europe, America, and Asia began translating it. Ngozi wore her traditional wrapper and a white headcloth in every country, a tribute to the Queen Maker. In interviews, she said, my grandmother taught queens. I teach the world. Years later, Ifunanya, now old, returned to Mount Ncheta, where she once released a dove. She planted a tree in Nwanneka's name. Children from across the nation came to lay down books beneath its roots. She said only one sentence. She taught us to rise. May we never sit in silence again. Then she bowed and walked away. The Queenmaker's story had become a cycle, not a chapter in history, but a living rhythm,